That woman can shake a man, not because she plays games, but because she refuses to participate in games. There is something profoundly powerful about a woman who genuinely enjoys her own life. She has dreams that existed before he arrived. She has standards that don't disappear because she finds someone attractive. She can be affectionate without becoming dependent. She can be interested without becoming obsessed. She can love deeply without making another person responsible for her entire emotional world. And when a man encounters that, something changes, because suddenly he realizes, I cannot win her through inconsistency. He cannot give her attention today and expect unlimited access tomorrow. He cannot disappear and assume she will remain emotionally frozen in the same place, waiting for his return. He cannot offer the bare minimum and expect her gratitude simply because she likes him. She is not trying to punish him. She has simply stopped negotiating against herself. And this is where many women misunderstand their own power. They think being high value means being difficult, mysterious, cold, or unavailable. It doesn't. Real confidence isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about caring without losing yourself. You can want him and still have boundaries. You can miss him and still refuse to chase him. You can be deeply attracted to him and still observe whether his actions match his words. You can give someone a chance without giving them unlimited chances. That distinction changes everything, because when you are desperate to be chosen, you start evaluating yourself through someone else's eyes. Does he like me? Why hasn't he texted? Was I too available? Should I wait longer before replying? What can I do to make him want me more? But when you become grounded in your own worth, the questions change. Do I like how he treats me? Does his behavior align with what I want? Do I feel peaceful around him? Is he consistent? Is this relationship helping both of us become better people? Do you see the difference? One woman is auditioning, the other is discerning, and you were never meant to spend your life auditioning for love. You were meant to participate in it. There is a divine principle hidden inside this. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you, not because people are always malicious. Sometimes people simply respond to the standards we establish. If you repeatedly accept inconsistency, you may accidentally communicate that inconsistency is enough. If you repeatedly excuse disrespect, you may teach someone that your boundaries are negotiable. If you repeatedly chase someone who withdraws, you can create a dynamic where they learn that distance gets them more of your attention. But when you become clear, something beautiful happens. You stop trying to manipulate behavior and start revealing character. You stop asking, how do I make him chase me? And you start asking, is he capable of meeting me? That is a completely different mindset. And this is why your independence can shake him. Not because independence is a weapon. Because independence removes the illusion that he is your only source of happiness. A woman with a full life is not waiting for a relationship to begin living. She is already living. She has friendships, purpose, growth, creativity, faith, work, goals, rest, joy. So when someone enters her life, he is not becoming her entire world. He is becoming part of a world that already exists. And that creates a healthier kind of attraction. Because love should add to your life, not become the condition for you to enjoy it. Think about the emotional difference. If you believe, I need him to choose me, every interaction becomes emotionally loaded. But if your mindset is, I would love for this to work, but I will not abandon myself to make it work, you become calmer. You listen differently. You observe differently. You communicate differently. And you make decisions differently. You no longer confuse anxiety with chemistry. You no longer interpret uncertainty as excitement. You no longer call emotional inconsistency mystery. You begin to understand that peace is not boring. Consistency is not weakness. Clarity is not a lack of passion. And a healthy relationship does not require you to constantly decode another human being. That brings us to your standards. A woman with standards doesn't say, "You have to become perfect before I will love you." She says, "I know what kind of relationship I am willing to participate in." There is a difference. Standards are not demands for perfection. They are guidelines for self-respect. You can be compassionate and still have standards. You can understand someone's fears and still refuse to accept poor treatment. You can recognize someone's potential and still judge the relationship by their present behavior, because potential is not a relationship. Promises are not consistency. Chemistry is not commitment, and attraction is not compatibility. One of the greatest mistakes you can make is falling in love with who someone could become while ignoring who they repeatedly choose to be. You cannot build a relationship with potential. You build it with behavior. So watch what happens when you stop over-functioning. Stop sending the fifth message because the first four weren't answered. Stop creating explanations for behavior that needs no explanation. Stop doing emotional labor for two people. Stop trying to convince someone to recognize what they are losing while they are actively choosing not to value it. Let people reveal themselves. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. And clarity is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Because when you stop interfering with someone's choices, you finally get to see what they would choose without being persuaded. And sometimes that answer will hurt, but it will also free you, because rejection is painful, but self-abandonment is expensive. Never pay for someone's love with your dignity. Never trade your peace for temporary attention. Never become smaller because someone feels threatened by your strength. The right relationship will not require you to become less of yourself to keep someone comfortable. And this is where emotional calm becomes incredibly powerful. Imagine a man becomes distant. The old version of you might panic. You might wonder what you did. You might send messages. You might try to make him jealous. You might post things hoping he notices. You might become cold just to provoke a reaction. But the grounded version of you pauses, you observe. You don't manufacture drama. You don't punish. You don't chase. You simply allow his behavior to provide information. That is emotional maturity. You don't need to react to every change in someone's energy. Sometimes the most powerful response is to remain centered, because when you are centered, you don't make permanent decisions from temporary emotions. You don't send messages you'll regret. You don't beg for clarity from someone who is committed to being unclear. You don't confuse someone's withdrawal with a verdict on your worth. You understand that people are allowed to choose, and so are you. This is the part many people miss. Your power isn't in making him afraid to lose you. Your power is in being completely unwilling to lose yourself. Ride that again. You don't need to become unforgettable. You need to become unshakable in your relationship with yourself. Because when you know who you are, you stop desperately trying to become what someone else wants. And ironically, that authenticity often creates the strongest attraction. Why? Because authenticity is rare. A woman who doesn't constantly perform for approval is memorable. A woman who can disagree respectfully is memorable. A woman who can say no without hatred is memorable. A woman who can say, I like you, without saying, therefore I'll accept anything from you, is memorable. A woman who can walk away peacefully is memorable. Not because she is playing hard to get, because she is hard to compromise. There is a difference. Being hard to get can be an act. Being hard to compromise is character. And character cannot be faked forever. So if you want a man to recognize your value, stop focusing exclusively on how to make him recognize it. Focus on living in a way that recognizes it yourself. Build a life you don't want to escape from. Develop standards you don't betray when you're lonely. Become emotionally strong enough to hear no without collapsing. Become wise enough to hear yes without becoming dependent. Become confident enough to receive love without begging for it. And become discerning enough to know the difference between someone who wants access to you and someone who wants to build something meaningful with you. Because not every man who is attracted to you is capable of loving you well. And that is an important distinction. Someone can desire you and still lack emotional maturity. Someone can miss you and still not be ready for commitment. Someone can be fascinated by you and still not know how to build a healthy relationship. So don't measure love only by intensity. Map shore it by consistency. Map shore it by accountability. Map shore it by effort. Map shore it by respect. Measure it by whether their actions continue to match their words when the excitement fades. Because real love isn't only what happens when someone wants you. It's what happens when they are given the opportunity to treat you well. And finally, understand this. Your willingness to walk away is not about threatening someone with abandonment. It is about refusing to abandon yourself. There may come a moment when you have to say, I care about you, but this isn't enough for me. That sentence requires courage because you may still have feelings. You may still hope. You may still imagine what could have been, but maturity means understanding that love alone doesn't make every relationship healthy. Sometimes you have to release what you wanted because reality isn't giving you what you need. And when you can do that without bitterness, something changes inside you. You become free. You no longer need someone to regret losing you. You no longer need them to come back. You no longer need the apology. You no longer need the validation. You simply need to know that you were faithful to your own values. That is the ultimate transformation. Because the goal isn't to become the woman a man is terrified to lose. The goal is to become the woman who is no longer terrified of losing someone who refuses to value her. And when you reach that place, you don't have to chase attention. You don't have to manipulate desire. You don't have to perform mystery. You don't have to compete with other women. You simply stand firmly in who you are. You love generously. You communicate honestly. You maintain your boundaries. You protect your peace. And you allow people to meet you where you stand. That is what makes you different. Not perfection, not games, not pretending. Self-respect. So don't ask yourself, how can I make him realize I'm not like other women? Ask yourself something much more powerful. Am I living in a way that honors the woman I know I am? Because when the answer becomes yes, you stop needing to convince anyone. The right person will recognize your value, the wrong person may not. And either way, you remain whole. That is the kind of woman who doesn't need to chase. That is the kind of woman who doesn't need to prove. That is the kind of woman who can love deeply without losing herself. And that is the kind of woman who changes the entire dynamic, not by controlling a man's emotions, but by mastering her own. When you stop abandoning yourself for love, you become available for the kind of love that never asks you to. There is something deeply powerful about a woman who has a life of her own. She can care about a man without making him the center of her universe. She can enjoy his attention without depending on it. She can appreciate his presence without becoming afraid of his absence. That kind of independence changes the emotional dynamic because it communicates it something without needing to announce it. I want you, but I do not need you to validate me. When a woman constantly seeks reassurance, her attention can become predictable. If he pulls away, she moves closer. If he becomes distant, she tries harder. If he responds slowly, she starts wondering what she did wrong. Eventually, the relationship becomes less about connection and more about managing her anxiety. But when she has emotional independence, she doesn't automatically react to every shift in his behavior. She observes, she thinks, she gives situations room to reveal themselves. This doesn't mean becoming cold or pretending not to care. In fact, genuine independence allows you to care more honestly because your affection isn't driven by fear. You can tell someone you miss them without needing them to immediately reassure you. You can express interest without overextending yourself. You can give love while still maintaining your own standards, routines, friendships, ambitions, and sense of purpose. And that can shake someone who is accustomed to being the center of another person's attention. He realizes that your world does not stop when he enters it. Your happiness doesn't depend entirely on his messages, his approval, or his commitment. You are choosing to share your life with him, not surrendering your life to him. That distinction is enormous. A woman who knows how to stand on her own becomes difficult to manipulate because she isn't desperate to hold on at any cost. She doesn't threaten to leave. She simply knows that her peace matters. And when someone understands that your attention is a choice rather than an obligation, they begin to recognize that your presence has real value. A woman with standards understands that her value is not determined by how much she is willing to tolerate. She doesn't believe that being loving means accepting every behavior, overlooking every inconsistency, or endlessly making excuses for someone who isn't meeting her halfway. She can be warm, compassionate, and understanding while still knowing exactly what she will and will not accept in a relationship. This kind of woman doesn't create standards to control a man. She creates them to protect the quality of her own life. She doesn't say, "You must behave this way because I need to control you." She says, "This is the kind of relationship I am willing to participate in." That distinction changes everything. When you communicate your expectations clearly and then consistently live by them, you stop teaching someone that your boundaries are negotiable. If a man knows that you will always forgive broken promises, tolerate disappearing acts, or accept inconsistent effort simply because you like him, there is little incentive for the relationship to evolve. But when your actions match your words, he understands that access to your time, attention, and emotional energy comes with responsibility. This doesn't mean demanding perfection. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone sometimes gets things wrong. Standards are not about expecting someone to never fail. They are about observing whether they take responsibility when they do. A man who genuinely wants to build something meaningful with you won't necessarily agree with every boundary you have, but he will understand that you have the right to have them. And instead of asking you to lower your standards so he can remain comfortable, he may begin asking himself how he can become a better partner. That's where real respect begins. You don't have to lecture someone into treating you well. You demonstrate what healthy treatment looks like by what you accept, what you decline, and what you consistently walk away from. Your standards become a quiet declaration that says, I am open to love, but I am not available for anything that requires me to betray myself. And that kind of self-respect doesn't push the right person away. It gives the right person something meaningful to rise toward. There is a powerful difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally reactive. Being available means you can communicate, care, listen, and express what you feel. Being reactive means someone else's behavior immediately determines your emotional state. If he takes longer to reply, you panic. If he becomes distant, you chase. If his energy changes, you immediately assume you did something wrong. Your entire inner world begins responding to his every movement. But emotional calm gives you something far more valuable: perspective. When you remain calm, you don't need to solve every moment of uncertainty immediately. You can step back and ask yourself what is actually happening rather than allowing fear to create a story. Maybe he is genuinely busy. Maybe something has changed. Maybe he is losing interest. Maybe there is a misunderstanding. Instead of immediately choosing the explanation that scares you most, you allow his consistent behavior over time to give you the answer. This doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means addressing them from strength rather than panic. A grounded woman can say, I noticed you've been distant lately. Is everything okay? Without turning the conversation into an emotional interrogation. She can express disappointment without attacking. She can ask for clarity without begging for reassurance. And if the behavior continues, she can make a decision based on reality instead of repeatedly trying to convince someone to behave differently. That kind of emotional stability can be deeply attractive because it creates safety. There is no constant emotional roller coaster. There is no need to guess which version of you will appear depending on his behavior. You become someone who can feel deeply without being controlled by every feeling. And perhaps most importantly, your calm allows you to observe rather than chase. You begin noticing whether his effort is consistent, whether his words match his actions, and whether he naturally moves toward connection or only responds when you pursue him. You don't need to manufacture distance to make someone miss you. You don't need to become cold to appear valuable. You simply stop overreacting and allow people to reveal themselves. When you are emotionally grounded, you stop asking, how do I get him to give me what I want? And start asking, is this relationship actually giving me what I need? That shift turns anxiety into discernment and transforms the way you approach love. There is a profound difference between walking away to make someone chase you and walking away because you refuse to abandon yourself. The first is a strategy. The second is self-respect. When a woman truly understands this difference, she stops using distance as a manipulation and begins using boundaries as protection for her peace. Walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. Sometimes you can care deeply about someone and still recognize that the relationship isn't giving you the consistency, respect, or emotional security you need, you may still miss them. You may still remember the beautiful moments. You may even believe there is potential. But you also understand that potential cannot substitute for present behavior. This is where many people lose themselves. They become attached to what a relationship could become and start tolerating what it actually is. They keep explaining, forgiving, waiting, and hoping that eventually the other person will recognize their value. But love should not require you to repeatedly convince someone to treat you well. When you are willing to walk away, you send a powerful message, not necessarily to him, but to yourself. My desire for this relationship will never be greater than my commitment to my own dignity. That mindset changes the way you communicate. You no longer threaten to leave during every disagreement. You don't use silence to punish. You don't disappear hoping someone will panic. Instead, you become honest about what you need and what you are no longer willing to accept. And if the other person chooses not to meet you there, you allow their decision to be their decision. That can be uncomfortable because walking away means surrendering control over the outcome. You cannot force someone to regret losing you. You cannot make someone suddenly become ready. You cannot guarantee that they will come running back. But you can guarantee one thing: you will not lose yourself trying to keep someone who isn't choosing you fully. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop chasing an answer and start trusting the evidence in front of her. If someone consistently shows that they cannot offer the relationship you desire, you don't need another 100 explanations. You need courage. Your ability to walk away isn't proof that you don't love deeply. It is proof that your love for yourself finally has a place in the relationship too. The greatest transformation happens when you stop trying to become the woman a man is afraid to lose and start becoming the woman who refuses to lose herself. Your independence, your standards, your emotional calm, and your willingness to walk away are not tactics designed to control someone. They are expressions of self-respect. You can love deeply without chasing, care without becoming dependent, and give someone your heart without handing them the power to determine your worth. The right person will not require you to shrink, beg, or constantly prove yourself. Let your life speak through your confidence, your boundaries, your peace, and your purpose. You are not valuable because someone finally recognizes your worth. You are valuable because your worth was never dependent on their recognition. Thank you for listening and giving yourself the time to reflect on these truths. Remember, you don't have to chase love, manipulate attention, or compete for someone's